Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. I am your host, Jason Cercone, and today we're going to take a look at 3 ways to get noticed as a podcaster. When you're developing your podcast, your audience will associate you and your content as one and the same. You're the host, you're the producer, you're wearing a multitude of hats with your podcast, and if you're doing things right, your audience is gravitating to you for a reason. The content that's coming from your podcast and the person that's on the microphone conducting the interviews, building the relationships, and giving the audience a reason to listen are going to be seen as one as your podcast evolves. So, piggybacking on some of the characteristics the best podcasters have, which is what I talked about on episode 83 of Pod Theory, today I'm going to cover how podcasters can stand out and get noticed. As you know, it's a pretty crowded party, and there are millions of podcasters looking to do that very thing. When you look at it in the macro, it can seem intimidating, maybe even impossible, especially since so many podcasters have gotten out ahead of you. But let's drill down a bit. First of all, you aren't trying to appeal to the entire podcast listening population. It would be nuts to think you could appeal to that many people, right? Drilling down even further, what purpose would it serve to appeal to a mass audience that large? The content of your podcast should be geared towards a specific listener, your optimal podcast listener, if you recall the lesson from episode 65 of Pod Theory. And an audience comprised of these optimal listeners will give you more targeted reach for your message. This will lead to a better brand building experience, better feedback in the way of reviews because your content is catered to the right people, and a better listener experience for your audience members as they're in tune with what you have to say and seeking knowledge, information, humor, and commentary on that very subject that you focus on. So standing out and getting noticed as a podcaster just got a little easier. It's not a slam dunk, obviously, but eliminating the mindset that says you need to please everyone and attract everyone to your show will definitely help. Now, how do you get noticed? Here are 3 things that you can do right now. Number 1, be present and active in groups dedicated to the subjects you cover on your show. This is one of my favorite things to do because when you break it down, all you're doing is talking about something you love. Clearly, podcasting is a big part of my life, so I spend time every day in the Facebook groups and Twitter participating in conversations that are taking place about podcasting. Or I'll get a conversation started. You can build some great relationships by staying active and helping others solve problems. You can do the same just by being yourself and carrying on a conversation with others. You don't need to be overly salesy, and you don't need to be promoting your podcast 24/7. That'll be a major turnoff. But if you're active and you're constantly getting your name out there, people are going to start to discover your podcast naturally. People will be genuinely interested in you because you're an active part of the conversations they enjoy. So they'll find your show without you even having to say a word about it. That said, times will present themselves where you can mention your show without looking like a promotion machine. Perhaps someone brings up a subject that you just covered on your latest release. Let them know about it. This process takes a little bit more time to develop, but blocking off 30 to 60 minutes a day to be present in these groups can go a long way towards helping you get noticed as a podcaster. Number 2, create content outside of your podcast. Your podcast is your foundation and the ultimate hub that you want people to find. But producing content outside of the podcast can serve as a bridge that brings more listeners your way. Write a feature that expands on the subject matter of one of your podcasts and find blogs to post it on. Or post it on yours and run some ads pointing to it. When you do this, don't forget to link to your podcast in the article so people who find your write-up first can take that next step and listen to your podcast on that very subject. Or maybe you can do an additional weekly segment on your social media platforms or on your website or on your YouTube channel. You can do live video or something fun and engaging that allows you to connect with your audience in an additional way. Then you can direct them towards your podcast. Leverage all of the outlets you have at your disposal and put something together that has cross appeal, meaning your podcast listeners will also check it out, and people who find your content on those specific platforms will take the next step and go find your podcast. And finally, number 3, stay consistent and keep getting better at your craft. You really want to stand out and get noticed as a podcaster? Prove it. Keep your content releases consistent each and every week. Take time to practice your delivery so you can keep getting better and honing that skill set. Keep working hard to master your craft. How do you do this? Listen to other podcasters. Listen to radio and TV personalities. How do they deliver their message? What makes them an appealing personality that people want to listen to? Embrace those characteristics. Mix them with your own personality and keep bringing your A game to the mic each episode you record. This will help you stand out and get noticed, and as your audience grows, more listeners will see your commitment to being the best podcaster you can be. Getting noticed as a podcaster doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience and commitment to your purpose. If you're using a podcast to grow your brand and share your content, developing a marketing strategy that connects with your audience will naturally help you get noticed over time. As more listeners enter the fold, the more all of the hard work you put into the overall production of your podcast will pay off and enhance your ability to get noticed for all of your efforts. Pencils down. That concludes today's lesson on pod theory. Before I sign off, I'd like to introduce a new segment on the show called Deck Pandemonium. In case you haven't heard, Pod Theory is now sponsored by our friends at Poddex, a great service that helps you amp up the conversations on your podcast and bring some new content to the airwaves. No podcaster should be without these decks, and you, that's right, you, can save 10% off of any order of physical Poddex products by visiting poddex.com today. Use the promo code PODTHEORY to save 10% off your order. So what is Deck Pandemonium? Well, that's me putting myself on the spot by randomly selecting one card from one of my 5 Deck decks, say that 3 times fast, and then talking about it. So I shuffled these before the show started, and I'm going to pull this card off the top of the deck right now. Here we go. This card reads, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? Great question. And it's actually what I'm working on right now. So my entire life, I've always battled with weight. I've gone up, I've gone down. There's actually an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm about the weight yo-yo. Felt like that one was about me to some degree. And I'm currently in the process of yoing down. And anybody that has seen that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's one thing that I would absolutely change about myself. And that's something that when I think about it, I'm doing it right now, and I'm actually, it's funny that was the card drawn. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on episode 85 of Pod Theory, so you'll want to tune into that when that goes live. But yeah, I'm looking to bring my weight down, and what I've really discovered in doing that is it's all about the mindset. You really have to be in the right frame of mind to attack this, and absolutely, if there was one thing that I would change about myself right now, it would be my overall appearance and my weight. And that is happening as we speak. So game on. So that is this week's installment of Deck Pandemonium. Again, jump over to poddex.com, check out all the products, and save 10% on your order using the promo code PODTHEORY when you check out. Good talk. I'll see you back here tomorrow. This has been Jason Cercone on Pod Theory.